Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys! Welcome back to r/PettyRevenge, where the revenges don't destroy or ruin people, but they're so satisfying. And in today's episode, OP teaches a nightmare Karen neighbor who won't stop calling police on him a lesson she won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your stories to this email right here. Okay, so I have to tell you about a petty hero I saw one day while lining up at the bank. I was waiting in line at the bank during the pandemic, and if you guys remember, at the time, they had you lined up outside. And on this particular day, it was really windy and kind of raining and cold, so everyone was bundled up. I watched a man get out of his car holding a check and some papers, and as he was scrambling to get the paperwork straightened out of nowhere, the wind decides to take his check and whip it away from him. I watched the check fly towards us in line, and a nice man behind me actually got out of line. He actually ran for it and quickly stomped on it to prevent it from fully flying away. Of course, everyone in line at this point was relieved that the man saved the check from blowing away completely. And the next part is what blew everyone away. No pun intended. Of course, we weren't expecting the man to thank the hero for saving the check, but we definitely weren't expecting him to say, "Thanks for stepping all over the check, you idiot. The bank probably won't accept it now that it's wet and dirty." And that's when the man lifted his foot and let the check blow away. And he responds, "Well, they definitely won't accept it now." We all watched as the wind whips the check across the street and the man loses it, screaming every curse word at the guy he could. He doesn't even bother chasing it down the street. He just gets in his car, angry revs it, and then screeches away. Now that was some satisfying petty revenge, guys. And seriously, some people can't seem to say thank you, can they? Like, what was the man expecting that hero to do? Catch it with his hands, or did he want the guy to dive on top of it, as if it were a live grenade? Okay, so this was a few years ago on a 13-hour Greyhound trip when I was in the middle of a mental breakdown. These people beside me were listening to music quite loudly, and if that wasn't bad enough, it was awful music. It was the kind of rap where the only words you can understand are bitch and the N-word, and they were said frequently. Now, of course, it was driving me nuts, so I tried politely asking them to use headphones. They refused because they had kids and the kids needed to be entertained. So I told them to give the kids headphones. This led to me getting cussed out, which led to a heated argument. And that's when another passenger starts listening to music loudly just to troll me at this point. I tried to get the bus driver to enforce the rule that says that headphones are required to listen to music on the bus, and he threatened to dump me on the side of the road instead. I kind of hit my limit at that point, and decided to share my misery with the whole bus. That's when I said, okay, since we're not enforcing the rules about not being noisy and using headphones, I'll just sing. Now, it should be noted that while I don't have the best voice, I am a trained vocalist from childhood. I can at least avoid sounding like a strangled cat if I want to, but I didn't want to. And that's when I launched into a very loud, very hoarse, and very off-key rendition of the song that never ends. It only took one sing-through for the troll to put headphones in, and it took a couple of loops before the whole bus was screaming at the passengers to either put headphones in or turn off their music so I would shut up. We rode the rest of the way in blissful silence. Guys, I love this petty revenge so much because OP is clearly the hero without a cape that day. Because I'm certain that OP wasn't the only one on that bus annoyed with that loud music. And guys, if I were on that bus, I'd be 100% on Team OP and start singing along with them as well. Hey, I got nieces and nephews. I have no problem singing Baby Shark for 6 hours straight. On this day, I stopped at one of those candy stores inside malls. The ones with tons of bins full of random candy and the bags you fill up yourself with tongs, where you then get charged some crazy price by the pound. So on this visit, they seemed to be running a special. Next to where the bags were kept to fill up your candy, they had a sign saying free cups to store your candy. So I opted for that instead of the bag because, hey, free cup, right? When I got to the counter and they weighed the candy, the total came up on the register, but I had to question it since I may not have heard the price right. It was about double what I was expecting it to be. I then asked how much candy they weighed and what the price breakdown was. The two clerks behind the register looked irritated that I even had to question them, but they gave me the weight and also added that they charged me several dollars for the cup that was supposed to be free. I then asked, hey, aren't those cups supposed to be free? They tell me, no, they're not free, they're $4. To which I say, there's a big sign saying free cups. And they said, no, there isn't. That's when I walk over and point to the sign that said free. And they said, oh, We used to have free cups, but we ran out, so we put plastic jars there instead. That's when I asked, isn't that a little bit misleading? To which they said, no, because these are jars. They clearly aren't cups. I then asked, would it be fair to say someone looking at that sign that says free cups and sees a plastic container where the sign is and assumes that it's a cup? And they told me, no, because it's not a cup. I told them there's nothing else around the sign, only containers and a sign that says free. There was no response at that point, and I realized that I was getting nowhere. I then tell them, fine, I'll just dump the candy in a bag and you can keep the jar. And they say, no, you can't do that because you've touched the jar. We can't sell it to someone else now. Now, they said that smugly, expecting my defeat. But then I remembered that they didn't have my credit card yet, so I said, okay, just keep the candy too. Bye. They realized that they would now need to toss out both the candy and the jar I had, and the smirks they were trying to hide quickly turns into scowls, and I could feel the daggers being stared at me as I walked out. Yeah guys, I doubt they threw the candy out at that point. They probably ate it, or even worse, just dumped it back into the candy pile. And seriously, in situations like this is where Karens really shine. This is honestly a legit reason to demand the manager and make them remove that sign. So I've been moved into my new house for a bit over a week, and I have this entitled neighbor who I'm gonna call Karen because since moving in, she's been just that, a Karen. I just got my home gym set up, and I have a garage that I'm using as a fully equipped home gym. And today, I had a knocking on my door. It wasn't Karen though, it was the building inspector. The building inspector came equipped with pictures of my gym, all the cameras on my property, the complete outside. It was kind of disgusting how many pictures the guy had. After a talk with him, there were no infractions at all. I had to check my cameras, and yep, you guessed it. There's Karen walking all over my property snapping pictures. And the Karen even had the balls to go into my garage to take a picture. So yeah, I decided to get petty. I asked the building inspector about the laws with my floodlights and where I can point them, and they're now pointing as far as they legally can at Karen's house. Enough to give her a nice flash of light every time they turn on. To be extra petty, I even went to Home Depot. I bought some timers, so they now turn on overnight for 30 seconds every hour at the 30-minute mark. So 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, and 4:30. The Karen came banging on my door this morning to scream about the lights. She also mentioned that I shouldn't have gym equipment in my garage as you can't do business out of your house. I told her my gym is for me, not for anyone else. She then tells me she's scared that my gym is going to attract some unsavory characters. But seriously, Karen, it's a home gym, not a meth lab. Yeah guys, I don't think I would have gotten petty at that point, like at all. I wouldn't have even entertained the floodlight idea. The woman clearly went out of her way to get OP in trouble, so with that, I think I'd be calling the police and showing them the footage of her trespassing on my property and then breaking into my garage to snap pictures. What a nightmare neighbor. So OP does come back with a part 2, and here it is. He says, yesterday I posted about my Karen neighbor, and last night she pushed me too far. My girlfriend and I were outside on the front deck playing video games. I brought the TV out so we could play some games and have a beer and just to enjoy the evening. It wasn't late though, it was 7 p.m. My girl and I were having a few rounds of Mario Kart 64 when Karen marches her ass over to say, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" She was referring to the TV on the deck, the beer in the hands, and my general enjoyment of life. I replied, just enjoying our evening. It was at that point Karen told me to take all the crap and my whore inside, as it's not the place for this. And that's when she finally pushed me too far and I snapped. I stood up and told her to shut the F up and get off my property or I'm gonna drag her off. That's when Karen laughs at me saying that I have no idea what's going on and that she sees cars and men going into my home all day when I'm at work, trying to poke at me. She's not wrong though, a lot of people do stop by during the day to see me and she doesn't realize that I basically work from home. That's when I get even more pissed. I walk to the stairs to confront her, and she waddles back to her house in a hurry. And 30 minutes later, cops show up with a complaint. They refused to do anything about her when I explained, and they wouldn't even take a report. Nothing. They said it's a personal matter, and it's my problem. They basically told me to just stay inside if she doesn't like me. Now, the only reason I chose this house was that beautiful front deck. I saw it as the perfect hangout for my friends and I. Well, the following day, I had plans to take the bikes out with my crew and do a cruise. But because Karen chose to call cops on me, it all changes. I call one of my buddies Bruce, and Bruce got the word out about the change of plans. Now, the revenge is a very simple thing. Drive Karen crazy enough for her to repeatedly call the cops on me. And here's some information about my friends and I. We're all big burly men, and most of us are covered in tattoos. And if I said biker, that's exactly what we look like. So plan in action, my friends get to my place at about 1 p.m. You could hear them arrive. Imagine 6 very big, very loud Harleys pulling up in your drive. The entire house shakes. It's a thing of beauty. The entire crew dismounts and we start our day by just having a grand old time on the front of my place. Karen eventually waddles out of her house, stares at us, and we crank up the music. She then starts walking over to my house and we all start booing her, and that stops her dead in her tracks. Her jaw almost hits the ground as she walks back into her house. And just as we thought, a little while later, the cops show up. At this time, the revenge is in full swing. Now picture this, 7 big burly, bearded tattoo men sitting shirtless in short shorts playing poker on the poker table that we carried outside. The cops were getting annoyed, being called to my place on a daily basis. They just want me to do whatever Karen wants to help keep the peace. After some words, the cops knew there was nothing they could do. I then told the cops if they don't do something about Karen, this is gonna happen every single day until they tell her to stop being a bitch, because we're doing nothing illegal. That's when the cops go over to Karen's house and she came outside, did some fake crying, pointing, and screaming at us, and she said how we're not allowed to be shirtless outside playing poker. And as she was doing that, we got extra mischievous and we turned on the sprinkler. So now we have a Karen screaming, crying to the cops, while 7 big burly tattooed shirtless men in short shorts were prancing through a sprinkler, with the classics from Backstreet Boys playing on the stereo. The cops came back to talk to us, asking us how long we're gonna be. We said all day when they went back to their car, and we waved by and said see you tomorrow. Karen closed all the curtains in her house, and we're doing this all again tomorrow. Oh, and I do need to add something. My 70-year-old neighbor on the other side comes out at 6 p.m. to see what's going on. I love this guy. He's an old school hippie and he sat down with us and had a joint with us. The guy gets harassed by Karen a lot and hopes we keep it up. Tomorrow will be fun. Guys, this petty revenge is absolutely epic. I love how petty OP and his friends got while the cops were there. Like, just imagining 6 of the most hardcore looking bikers in short shorts, prancing through sprinklers and dancing to Backstreet Boys. Like, it's epic and freaking hilarious. Alright, so a little background on the 2 main characters of this story. I'm a 31-year-old female now, but at the time, I was 24 or 25. I've been into heavy weightlifting for the past 7 or 8 years, and due to my dad's awesome genetics, I'm able to build muscle very easily for a woman. The other character is Hanky Panky, HP for short. He's this creepy old school friend of my parents who became a born-again Christian after getting caught by his wife while doing the dirty with his mother-in-law. And yes, you read that correctly. There were only a few people who were aware of this story, my parents included, which is how I found out. None of Hanky Panky's other Christian friends knew about this. The other Christian friends were also mutual friends of my parents, who were friends with me on social media as well. This becomes relevant later on. So around the time I started lifting, I built muscle quite fast, and I was proud of that. So naturally, I'd often post before and after pictures. For the first few months, Hanky Panky would always comment on my pictures, telling me to slow down because at some point, I'm gonna start looking manly. Now, I've always ignored those comments because they're ridiculous. So fast forward to a year into me lifting. I post another before and after picture, and here comes Mr. Hanky Panky telling me how I look manly. Unfortunately for him, he caught me on a bad day, so now I'm angry and I decide to engage in some back and forth commentary. I ask if me being a woman who lifts weights makes me manly, then what does that make him? A man who doesn't even lift at all. He decided to ignore that comment and he hit me with, well, the Bible says for women to look like women and for men to look like men. Oh, the light bulb that went off after reading that. I was no longer angry, but I was absolutely filled with pettiness now. I mean, how could I not be, after knowing all about his dirty little skeleton in his closet? So without further thought, I replied back with, I'm pretty sure there's something in the Bible that states not to sleep with your mother-in-law, but that didn't stop you, now did it? After I hit send on the comment, I sat back and watched the aftermath, and it was glorious. All of those mutual Christian friends were commenting, asking what happened, as they couldn't believe he would do such a thing. I even got a few private messages asking what happened, and how they were disappointed that he'd do such a thing. With his little reputation ruined, he decided to call my parents to tell them what I said. Halfway through the story, my mom just cuts him off and says, "Well, why are you even looking at our daughter's pictures? You're being a creep again." And then she hung up on him. My mom's a true savage, and I know I made her proud that day. But the best part about this story is that his own wife, and yes, they stayed married, liked my comment for calling him out. He avoided me like the plague after that. Okay, first of all, great petty revenge on Mr. Hanky Panky there. Secondly, I didn't expect to read that his wife stayed with him after that, guys, because if boyfriends or girlfriends get mixed up with parents, yeah, no, not at all. You gotta kick one of them to the curb at that point. But with that said, OP's mom is freaking savage, guys. I love it. Stay away from my daughter, you creep. So here's some background. I work in a rather specialized area of forensics. Officially, I'm employed by Police Scotland, but they tend to let other law enforcement agencies or universities borrow us from time to time. A lot of the time, it's for consulting work or guest lecturing, but sometimes we're sent to teach training courses. About 18 months ago, I was asked to lecture at a training course for some of the higher-ups in an English police force. It was the first time I'd done anything like that, and I was crapping myself. I met with the officials for dinner the night before my first day, and after dinner and drinks, I was dropped back at my hotel. So, to set the scene, it's about 10 p.m. I'm all dressed up in my evening wear, and I'm sitting at the bar in my hotel lounge. The place is dead. It's just me and the barman, so I've taken off my heels, and I'm unraveling my hair, and just ordered a hot chocolate. The barman asked if I want mini marshmallows in my hot chocolate, and of course I want mini marshmallows on my hot chocolate. And no, I do not mind waiting while you run to the kitchen. So I'm sitting there when this angry man walks in. He stomps into the room and slams his fist down on the bar about 3 feet away from me, and he barks out one word: coffee. Now, I didn't know it, but apparently that attempt at communication was aimed at me. A fact I learned a moment later when the angry man moved right up next to me, bent right over me so his face was practically in my face, and he barked out again, coffee. In an attempt to get away from the screaming coffee man, I slipped off the bar stool, putting it between the two of us. Extremely confused and a little more than terrified, it didn't occur to me that he thought I worked there. It wasn't even registering that he wanted a coffee. The guy was just repeating it the same way a toddler does when they learn a new word but don't entirely know what it means. Now, I'm not gonna blame the confusion, fear, and tiredness for my moronic response, which was the parrot of the word back at him. I said, coffee? The man then repeats, coffee. He then slams his fist on the bar again, and this time I noticed that he was actually throwing money at me. My brain suddenly came back online, and I said, the barman should be back in a second. He interrupts me and says, "Get me a coffee, now." To which I said, I'm sorry, mate, but I don't work here. The angry man is now shouting louder than ever, saying, "You effing lazy liar, do you think that I'm effing stupid? Get off your effing phone and get me a goddamn coffee." I say to him, I really don't. At that point, cue the rant about me being the only person in the lounge, so of course I must work there. And I was just being lazy, and did I take him for an idiot? All the while, I'm slowly backing away from the bar so he can't pin me between it and the bar stools. He then throws in this line. He says, "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any idea how important I am?" Now, I never did get to find out how important this guy thought he was. Instead, his friend comes wandering in. He takes one look at me, pretty much cornered by the angry man, who's now screaming that he'll make sure I never work again, while I'm trying to calmly tell him to back off, and he tries to intervene. He took the angry man by the shoulders and moved him back away from me while asking him what was going on. The angry man says, "This stupid little whore is refusing to serve me." And that's when his friend tells him, "She doesn't work here, let's just try to calm down." There were a few moments of Angry Man's friend trying to calm the guy down while he rants about me getting fired until 2 barmen arrive, one of them with my hot chocolate. The presence of the 3 men distracted the Angry Man enough for me to grab my shoes and escape with my chocolatey goodness. As I left, I could hear him demanding to speak to a manager. The next day, after being introduced to a lecture theater full of high-ranking officers, I stood and walked out to the podium, only to be greeted by one guy in the audience laughing hysterically. At that, I just sort of froze, trying to figure out the joke. That's when a few other people began to chuckle, as this guy struggled to get a hold of himself. As he regained control, he points to his left, where a very red, very embarrassed looking angry man was sitting. And that's when I got my petty revenge and said, "Oh, did you get your coffee in the end? How do you like your coffee, black or with cream and sugar?" The guy walked out, and I didn't see him for the rest of the course. Yes, guys, I would have loved it if OP added, "Do you know who I am, sir?" Guys, it makes me so happy that OP got to embarrass the guy after what he did. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /petty revenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories today, the super satisfying stories today. Then please hit that like button and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. A super entitled Karen thinks she owns a public park, guys. She tries to harass OP. Yeah, she basically thinks she owns a frickin' park. So guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.